Welcome back. April 15th is a big day in the history of the team now known as the Los Angeles Dodgers. 77 years ago today, April 15th, 1947, Jackie Robinson took the field for the then Brooklyn Dodgers, breaking baseball's decades-long color barrier. Fast forward to April 15th of 2024, every MLB player is wearing number 42 to honor Robinson. But lately, the Dodgers have much of their attention somewhere completely different. Newly signed Dodgers star Shohei Ohtani has been in the headlines in recent weeks, and it's tied back to one of baseball's historic no-nos, gambling. Ohtani's interpreter, Ippei Mizuhara, has been charged with felony bank fraud. Mizuhara allegedly took $16 million from Ohtani, which he used to pay off gambling debts. He reportedly racked up $40 million in gambling debts, and Mizuhara handled most of Ohtani's financials, keeping Ohtani's agent and even Ohtani himself in the dark about his alleged actions. As of now, there is no evidence Ohtani himself was connected to any of the betting. Let's bring in Meghann Cuniff, legal affairs journalist with the site legalaffairsandtrials.com. She's an expert in all things related to the legal system in Southern California and has been covering the fallout from this story around Ohtani. You've probably seen her go viral on TikTok and Twitter as well. So thanks for joining us. What does this mean for Ohtani legally based on the criminal complaint?
You know, the criminal complaint really seems to clear him of wrongdoing. And I've heard so many cops and investigators testify in court, and they always like to say that they go where the evidence leads them. And when you read through this complaint, it all points to his interpreter deceiving him over the years, having a severe gambling addiction, and actually impersonating him to his bank at one point to gain access to these funds. So I think there's so much attention to Ohtani and so much scrutiny on him over this. But when I read through that, I don't see anything in there that indicates any wrongdoing on his part other than just he trusted the wrong person.
Well, what stood out to me were these text messages between a bookie and the interpreter, and the bookie saying, quote, according to that document, obviously you didn't steal from him. I understand it's a cover job. I totally get it. And the interpreter responds saying, quote, technically, I did steal from him. It's all over for me. Meghann, how typical is it to have receipts like this in a bank fraud case?
You know, you do usually have heavy receipts in a bank fraud case because by its nature, it's a financial case with heavy documents. But typically, I don't see a basically what looks to be a confession at the very end of this criminal complaint. It was quite a kicker for the criminal complaint. But I think that moves this into the extraordinary category in terms of what we're getting from the defendant already.
Yeah. And another portion, the interpreter also saying to the bookie in November of 2022, quote, I'm terrible at this sport betting thing, huh? And he says, LOL, any chance you can bump me again? So speaking to the addiction part here, allegedly. And as you know, you don't have to worry about me not paying. I just thought, do we know how the interpreter was able to access such private information of Ohtani's, as alleged in the complaint? I mean, there's so many examples and moments where it's like, how did this go unchecked?
And it just looks like, given the position that he was in, and I mean, he was by Ohtani's side very often, and it seems like he'd really developed a rapport and a trust with him that gave him access to this. And I think it also just speaks to the position that somebody like Shohei Ohtani is in when he has large assets to manage, not only financial assets, but just business and sports. And then he himself is busy as an athlete traveling with the team. He has to have people around him that he can trust. And it seems like he funneled a lot of trust into this one person and now feels very betrayed by it.
Almost to that point, and bringing up what you were saying earlier about what investigators, tell you about following the trail of evidence. Ohtani and his interpreter, I mean, they were constantly around each other. He was one of the few people Ohtani could just speak easily and freely with. How are investigators accounting for all that time and all those interactions that maybe, aren't spelled out in text messaging exchanges?
I think they're looking at the whole big picture and the cooperation that they're getting really on both sides. And I think now would be the time for the interpreter, if he wanted to save himself and try to point the finger at anyone. Now would be the time. And if we're still not getting that, it just seems like any indication that Ohtani would have known about the gambling or been involved in that, if we had that, it would have come already. And one thing that stands out to me from the complaint is the passage about there's the bookie is asking the interpreter about the debts and saying you need to pay up, and actually mentions that he saw Ohtani walking in Newport Beach with his dog this morning, and he's wondering if maybe he should just go up to Ohtani and tell him about this. And I think that indicates the fact that the bookie was using Ohtani as some kind of leverage here to try to get his money, indicates that at least the bookie doesn't think that Ohtani knew about this, because it was powerful for him to be able to say that to the interpreter, kind of threaten him like that.
Yeah, I mean, based on the complaint, when you say if there was a moment for any finger pointing, it'd be now. Is there someone that the interpreter could potentially try to pull into this? I mean, clearly not Ohtani, because that hasn't happened just yet. And there's been, as you've pointed out, quite the presentation within this complaint that kind of clears Ohtani. But who else could be pulled into this?
The only real liability, the thing that stood out to me was the bank, and I saw some other people suggest this too, and some lawyers said that they would explore a possible lawsuit, at least on Ohtani's behalf, against the bank that apparently had lax enough standards and security that they let somebody get away with impersonating them and moving around a bunch of money like that. Somebody was saying that they should have had more security checks in place for that. So that could possibly be a civil route on his end to recover some of that money, because it'll always be a question of, if his interpreter does take a plea deal and gets sentenced and has restitution, what are the chances that he's going to be paying back $16 million anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, okay, obvious question here, but I mean, or maybe it's not an obvious question actually, but how likely is it that he gets this money back?
Right now, I would say it's unlikely on its face, at least through the criminal case. That would not be the route for it. And one thing that's interesting about this is to see what actually in the bank fraud charge that he's charged with, what is the dollar amount attached to that? Because so much of a criminal sentencing in a federal fraud case depends on the exact loss amount that is attached to the charge. So while we've heard about 16 million total in transactions from Ohtani's account, technically this bank fraud charge, it means the bank was the one who was victimized. So it'll be interesting, and I'm sure that's what the interpreter's lawyer has to be looking at that right now and negotiating with the U.S. Attorney's Office to try to come up with some kind of plea deal that has a dollar amount less than 16 million, because 16 million on the federal sentencing exposure chart puts him up into a few years in prison. At least he's looking at significant exposure time for that.
Well, you mentioned that plea deal that the interpreter is hoping for. What does that mean when it comes to potential prison time? I mean, how does that play out moving forward?
It's factored as acceptance of responsibility, and there is a whole formula for calculating in what's called an offense score in federal court, and that translates to a chart that shows you the possible sentencing routes. So getting a 3-point reduction for acceptance of responsibility is significant, because it can knock him down into a lower sentencing range, and then prosecutors could possibly argue for a departure even less than that, and it just reduces his time. However, it doesn't make his prison exposure go away completely. He still faces possibly significant time here.
Okay, and another question for you: how likely is it he secure that plea deal?
Well, I think right now, especially after the statement that he's issued, just with the confession and the complaint, and then the statement that his lawyer issued after his first appearance, is absolutely not the kind of statement you issue if you ever think that you might take this to trial, because he just apologizes for it and talks about wanting to get some kind of plea. So I think that indicates there definitely is going to be a guilty plea. Just in what form that's going to take shape, I think that right now is something that probably his lawyer and the prosecutor aren't even quite sure. That's got to be the negotiation right now.
All right. Well, Meghann Cuniff, legal affairs journalist. Folks, you can find her work at legalaffairsandtrials.com. Meghann, thank you so much for joining us and spelling out what's going on with this criminal complaint and in the court. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. And still to come on Scripps News tonight, what is next for Shohei Ohtani? Will this gambling scandal be a shadow that follows one of baseball's brightest and most expensive stars? We're going to pose that question to our next guest, senior editor of The Ringer and co-host of the Effectively Wild podcast, Ben Lindbergh. Stick around, folks. We're back right after this short break.